Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship Podcast. I'm Jodi Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. I want to welcome Lauren and Luke Smallcomb, who I've recently connected with, and I'm so excited. And you guys are now administrators in my private Facebook group that I've had for several years. And I'm so glad that you're on board and on the team there. And I just want to tell the world more about who you are, because I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And you're a neurodiverse couple. So this season, we're talking about, neurodiverse relationships and can they work in marriages and domestic relationships. And so I'd love for you guys to share with everybody a little bit more about who you are, what you do professionally, and then let's talk about you, the two of you, as a neurodiverse couple. So who would like to jump right in and get us started?
I'll give them the easy clue of who is neurotypical in our relationship, because I will really jump in.
Who goes first? I see that in my working with my clients. I always say, tell me a little bit about why you're here. I don't care who goes first. And it's obvious real fast.
We've learned how to like a river kind of flow our communication together when we're doing interviews or presenting a workshop or something. But it's funny, we just have very different communication styles, as your audience can surely relate to. So we thought, oh, I'm just super extroverted. And we thought, oh, Luke's just super introverted. And now we have a bit more clarity on that. But yeah, we live in Thailand. We're expats in Thailand. We live in northern Thailand, surrounded by mountains and tropical weather and fresh mangoes. And it's wonderful. We've been here for 8 years. Here with our kids. Yeah, I can't believe it's almost been a decade. And we have our own worldwide trauma healing practice. Here locally, we have our offices that we're in now, and we also see people virtually. So we've been doing that work together for the last 3 years. But before that, I'll let Luke share his journey. I have been many things in the healing world. I was first a nurse as like a 20-year-old working in the emergency room, and then it went to becoming a doula. And I was like, maybe I'll be a midwife and deliver babies. But I decided to go more holistic and be able to see more people. So I went into nutritional therapy, and then I couldn't fix myself. I had a lot of chronic health problems, and I ended up coming across this brain retraining modality. It's a mind-body medicine modality, and I recovered from over 70 chronic symptoms through the power of neuroplasticity. So long story short, I entered into his field. His field was always the psychology, and mine was like, oh, I'm physical health and your mental health, and which one's harder to treat? They're both so hard. And I kind of gravitated to the field of mind-body medicine and coaching in this practice we're doing now, really focusing on folks who are recovering from different traumas and chronic stressors in their lives. So that's me.
So very early in my career, because I kind of morphed in the area of mental health, but very early in my career, my specialization was acquired and traumatic brain injury. So it was interesting because that kind of prepared me for the different brain, but from more of a trauma, like an actual brain that's been harmed from a physical event of some kind, whether internal or external.
Yeah.
So I know what neuroplasticity is, but a lot of our listeners may not. Lauren, so can you just explain to people what you mean by that?
I love that you stop people and have them explain terms. That's amazing. Neuroplasticity, in its simplest explanation, is just the brain's innate ability to adapt and change on a physiological level and on a functional level. And
Mhm.
so because the brain was made to be neuroplastic, it's one of those things that can be, it's why actually trauma impacts us so much. So neuroplasticity isn't only good, it also makes us vulnerable to the brain changing to protect us.
Mhm.
But in the same regard, it can also change to heal us. And there's just so much hope in that fact that it is malleable. It really is like a moldable organ.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important. And what you just said about it changing to heal us is so critical, because I know there's a lot out there, a lot of narratives out there that trauma changes the brain, and that is true. But it's not only changing in the negative direction, that it can also, we can change it back and heal and a lot of things. So I think I love that you shared that. So Luke, tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah. So, mine was a little bit more of a consistent journey. I decided actually going a different direction, but towards the end of my undergrad, I decided I wanted to pursue counseling, psychology. So I took some prereqs and went to grad school and got my master's in clinical counseling. For the last 10 years, I've been practicing. I've done private practice and residential treatment for teenage boys. I've done volunteer NGO work as a counselor, and I've enjoyed it, learned a lot. But about 3 years ago, me and Lauren have always wanted to work with each other because modalities are so similar. But the more our modalities lined up, we're like, now's the time that we should start something. And yeah, and so we started our practice. And I just love what we're creating and being able to help people this way. And my paradigm has shifted a lot since grad school, because a lot of neuroscience trauma paradigms are like polyvagal theory or nervous system work. I didn't learn any of that in grad school. So over the last several years, learning that, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I see it helping myself, and I start applying to myself. I'm like, wow. And that's how I do my work. Is I find I like kind of dig in and own it and get to know it. And like, okay, this is how I now can, like people say, you can only help somebody as far as the journey that you've taken yourself on. And I find that to be very true with a lot of the paradigms that I use. Is I can only take people as far as I have taken myself. And so these paradigms, whether it's internal family systems, polyvagal theory, neuroscience, all that, to help trauma, as I've integrated it into my own life, my own journey, I could take that to my clients, and I just see that helping people so much. And it's just been such a joy to kind of, like Lauren was saying, having that hope of seeing, okay, that I've experienced trauma, they've experienced trauma, but that's not a sentencing of, okay, this is your trauma and you are going to be sentenced to this effect. Yes, you can't change it or get rid of it, but you don't have to live under that trauma. And more I've experienced that, it's helped our marriage, it's helped individually, and also the work that we do.
Yeah, and that's an important mindset there, that you're not permanently broken. You got scars, but
Right.
it's like when you break a bone, the bone's not permanently broken. You may still
Yeah.
have a scar or an ache in that joint or whatever, wherever. I think that's a really important mindset shift. And I'm right there with you on the training and the education. I was in grad school 25 years ago. There was nothing out there yet. I mean, Bessel van
Yeah.
der Kolk came out with so much of his trauma work since then, or at least it's become more well known since then.
Yeah.
And of course, neurodivergence wasn't even a term I ever heard in grad school. Autism was a chapter in a book in a class, and it was about little boys, and it had nothing. And then I grew up in the era of Rain Man being what autism was. And so
Yeah.
that paradigm shift is what's so critical. And those of us in
So
the
critical.
industry have, like you said, you've lived this. And the cohort that I have of colleagues that are working in this field, which we're a fairly small group around the world, because we're finding, I think there are more out there, but we're finding each other just like we found each other recently.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've talked to has really emphasized that those of us who are able to really help the others the most are the ones that have walked this walk, and that we've lived it and understand it. So your practice is Flourish Therapy, and we'll definitely put that in the
Correct.
show notes. And you have groups, you have private coaching and counseling. Anything specific you want to highlight and let people know about before we move on to talking about the two of you?
Well, I think as Luke was talking, I was kind of laughing because the growth we've done interpersonally, understanding our neurotypes and understanding that we are a neurodiverse couple has allowed us to be able to work together. So we would never be able to have this practice and not kill each other. It was like 10 years back. 5? Could we have done it 5 years ago? Maybe. But 10 years, definitely not. Anything before that,
Yeah.
it would have been a disaster. So this idea of like growing personally to understand this whole paradigm better has equipped us. And then now we're offering more things for clients. And it's one of those things for Luke that his clients just kind of in grad school, they told him like, your niches will find you. They will find you, the specialties that you're going to do. And trauma healing has been our focus for many years, also because we have adoptees. So we got really deep into it. But then the neuro piece came in because most of Luke's clientele and some of mine are neurodivergent as well. So we are offering neurodivergent support groups virtually, but also couple support groups will be starting in a few months, and we're weaving that with trauma healing work. So that's kind of something we're excited to do more of in these next year or so.
Oh, that thing about they will find you. I have told this story, but it's been a while, and I'll make it brief, but I did not want to work in the field of autism. I did not. I had been raising a daughter who was autistic since she was 5. Didn't even really fully understand that their dad was autistic until after we divorced. But I was starting to really realize that. So I decided to, when I did divorce, I didn't have a full practice at that time. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for a while. So I was kind of reinventing my whole career. I had been in practice for 15 years, did a lot of the traumatic and acquired brain injury. So I thought, I'll just go back to that, or, I was just trying to reinvent, or not reinvent, but kind of resurrect my practice.
Yeah.
And I had done a little bit of work in working with parents who had autistic children, because that was the walk I was walking. But I was like, I'm burned out. I don't want to do this anymore. And I just flat out said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then the emails that I don't even know how these people knew about me. I don't know where they came from. And because I didn't have this big online presence at the time, I not at all. And I just kept getting emails from people who needed help in their marriages. And that wasn't even something I'd ever done. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to. I just was like, nope. And I turned some people down, and then they're like, please. So I took on like 1 or 2, and I didn't even feel like, who am I to help them? My own marriage just ended, and then I started realizing, and I remember another person said to me, another colleague said, Jodi, if you don't help them, who will? And I was like, oh, okay. And then, like you said, what was the Field of Dreams movie? If you build it, they will come. I wasn't even building it but once I did build it, they did. It's been a flood ever since. So I really get that.
Yeah. I mean, again, we kind of entered, the neurodivergent arena, similar way of our kids think there's some things going on. How can we help them? What's going on? Then I'm like, oh, that sounds like my childhood. Oh, that sounds like struggles that I used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's been understanding myself, like Lauren was saying, then seeing that my clients were like, oh, you might want to think about this or look into this, or just helping them navigate. And it's been, it's an exciting new season of realizing, like, just understanding more and entering into this world of supporting more intentionally the neurodivergent community and couples, because because of our own journey. Like, if we knew that I was neurodivergent 20 years ago, first 15 years would have been a lot easier.
Yes. And I think it's a new season for the whole world, really, because we're on this precipice of really shifting that narrative, that paradigm shift of what is neurodivergence, and moving away from a disease model where we look at neurodiversity as a mental illness versus a neurotype and just a brain wiring. And I think that, another 10, 15 years from now, we're going to have a different, really different understanding of all of it. And I think so many people will have different I'm so hopeful for the next generation, for my children's generation and yours, because they're going into it with their eyes open now, whereas we didn't. And we didn't know what our different, we understood more about personality differences. Myers-Briggs was a big thing back when I was in undergrad and graduate school. So we kind of understood that, but we've got so much more understanding of what neurodiversity is. And this next generation is so much more self-aware and just able to have conversations about it. And I'm just so hopeful for them. Yeah. So let's talk about the two of you, because Lauren, you were saying that working together, having this awareness of how your brains are different. Not only are you making a marriage work, but you're working together in a business. And so many people question, I was just saying to you guys before we started recording, that so many people ask me, well, is it even possible for neurodiverse couples to make it? And my answer to that is always resounding, yes, of course it is. But there are ingredients that all couples have to have to make it in a marriage, that neurodiverse couples are no different in those regards. But then that understanding of our different brain types, and then what's important for a couple, for each partner to bring to it is really pivotal. And that's what this whole season, this whole podcast season's about. So you guys just jump in wherever you want in terms of that, what that journey's been like for you, and how that narrative has really changed things for you as a couple.
It's hard to know where to start, but I guess a big thing is me understanding more my capacity. I think that's a bit, that capacity and even social capacity. So just life capacity in general, but also social capacity. Early on in our marriage, I was working like 10-hour construction days in grad school, and I'd be coming home and very tired. And times where Lauren maybe would invite some people over, maybe on the weekend or at night, and I would just come home. I knew I had to show up, but I didn't feel like I had the capacity, but I didn't have language for it. I feel like I'm tired, but tired is not a good reason, so I have to show up. And then our friends would come over, and then they would leave, and Lauren's like, "Why are you so rude to our friends?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You didn't talk to them the whole time, or you just felt like you were just like zoned out and like act like you didn't care." And that was a tricky dynamic, because she didn't want to shame me. She didn't think I was a bad person, but I wasn't being socially appropriate. So but I took that as there was something wrong with me. So throughout our marriage, I would just start masking better, and I would just try to engage more, talk more, pretend, or frustrated or angry when she invited people over when I wasn't prepared for it. Because I knew I couldn't be myself, and maybe I couldn't mask well. And so that's just like a small picture snapshot of so many just misses of personality, of communicating.
It's making me think of the RSD cycle that we'd get trapped in.
Oh, yeah.
So Luke has had very strong RSD characteristics in the past: rejection sensitivity, dysphoria.
Which just means I would interpret her rejecting me. She does, quote unquote, reject me. I'd feel it more intensely. But when she wasn't rejecting me, I would interpret it as a rejection. And so like those areas where she's like, "Hey, why aren't you engaging with them?" She was just curious, or just trying to bring some insight or awareness. I would take that as like an attack. But RSD was a big thing.
So what would happen is this cycle of me giving this feedback, either giving it well or giving it with like a shaming sense behind it. Luke's RSD would flare up. He would get defensive and then either pull away and shut down, or attack me and make me the problem. And then what I would do, as we had this over-under functioning dynamic, I was like, oh, also he's avoidantly attached, I'm anxiously attached. So there's all these dynamics play, right? And so he would pull away, and then I'd be like, oh, I need to pursue him. So then I would come in strong with pursue and trying to make it better, trying to make it right. But he's, shutting down because his RSD is saying, like, I am not safe. I am threatened. She's judging me. She doesn't get me. and I'm like attacking further, which makes him shut down further. So that cycle happened with so many different issues, including the one he shared, that
Yeah.
just he felt so stuck in that, Jodi. Like, can someone please bring the rescue boat and pull us out
Yeah.
of this horrible, caustic, I don't even know a good analogy, quicksand that we just kept getting stuck in every time. It took many years to bring the insight we needed to know what was happening. And now that cycle is
Yeah.
there.
And what's so crazy making for couples, for both partners in that dynamic, is that you have this awareness that your partner is not this toxic, abusive person, but the whole dynamic feels, and you're not yourself. It's like you look at yourself and say, I know that my intentions, my heart, I know that that's all in a place that's not not somebody who's just, bad person. I don't usually use the word bad, but
Yeah.
you have this awareness about each other, but then it's like, but why? What is happening? And it feels like quicksand, like you said. And really, even just in that scenario that you described, Luke, about the weekends, it just
Yeah.
really goes back to one kind of small basic thing that both of you had no insight or awareness about how your brain just kind of goes offline at the end of the week, cognitively, emotionally, socially, that it has to have that recovery period. And
Yeah.
so, Lauren's like, hey, it's the weekend. Let's have friends over. It's socialize. That's what we do, And even though you were showing up, Luke, like you had that awareness of I need to be here, your brain was just offline. And there was nothing you could
So
do to
off.
necessarily bring it back online. And then to you, Lauren, that certainly looks like he's just being kind of rude and he checked out and disinterested in your friends. And of course it was confusing for you too, Lauren. What was that like
Yeah.
for you to be on that side of things, to see your husband behaving like this, like he's just could care less about these people that you're inviting over, but it not really aligning with who he is? What was that like for you?
Right. I think that's such a good point. You're saying, like, when you know your own nature and you know your partner's nature, their core heart and self, and that seeing such a different, experience, it is very confusing for couples. And for me, I think because of the attachment wounding that we each individually had, it just, Luke and I always say we should have never worked. Like, our specific combo is so, and we also believe, like you, that any couple that has the ingredients, any partnership that has the ingredients to make a partnership work can work, regardless of neurotype. But we just were so like oil and water in the sense of his needs and my needs are so different. Now that we have healed a lot of our attachment wounds and early trauma, we are way more compatible, honestly, but very different needs. In that situation, my anxious attachment was so triggered by seeing him not show up for me emotionally. So it's like, I don't know if the audience has ever heard of the still face experiment they did in, like, was it the 80s, Luke?
I'm not sure, but 80s or 90s, I think. Yeah.
So it's like they did this experiment in the attachment world that the baby is engaging with the mom, and the mom is showing reciprocity and interest and delight in the baby. And then all of a sudden the mom goes completely no flat affect, like stonewall face. There's nothing happening. And the baby's sitting there getting like internally distraught and just agonizing over, I can't get this mom to respond to me. And the mom's supposed to not respond. I don't know how ethical of an experiment it was, but the mom doesn't respond, and the baby just absolutely loses it. It's like that existential dread of, I'm alone and I don't have my attachment figure. So if you have an anxious attachment, or any of the insecure attachments really, but specifically with anxious, you learned somewhere along the way that I have to find a way to get them back. And so maybe it's that smiles real cute and that blows a bubble, or we learn as kids, I have to find a way to garner that attunement that I need. And so I just learned that I was a golden child in my family system, so I learned that really well. And when I couldn't get his attunement as a partner back to me, it would create such a panic in my system. And instead of just saying, oh, he's just, I didn't have the words for it then, but maybe I could have been like, oh, he's just tired, or, oh, he's just checked out. No big deal. It became this attachment wounding that it didn't need to be, but that was what my system interpreted it as.
I wasn't familiar with that specific study, but I'm really glad that you shared that, because I'm definitely aware of that reciprocity piece in infancy. As you were talking about, I even think about not just babies, but toddlers. If a toddler falls off the sofa, the first thing it does is looks at a parent to see, am I supposed to cry? Am I okay?
Yeah.
And then kind of takes their feedback from a parent's reassurance, or, even, are you okay? I'm not. So, because there's so much gold here in what you're talking about. And, I have my analogy about the backpack, where you've got this virtual backpack that you have everything in it that makes you who you are at any given moment in time. And everything's in there. And so what you're talking about, those early childhood experiences really set the stage for how we attach, how we interact with other very important figures in our lives. And you said that you and Luke shouldn't have worked, but oh my gosh, don't we find each other? We were talking about neurodiverse clients or people finding us as providers, but as couples and even friendships, we find the yin to our yang. We find the people who are our opposite. It's like this way of righting the wrongs. And we go and find those people who have the opposites of what, we need. It's like we need to try to fix that in adulthood, but we're unaware of all of it. It's like all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes in our brains. And so there's so many aha moments, I know, for me, when I look at, my choice and the people that my marriage, my friendships even, and you realize there's so much of that is rooted in the early childhood experiences. And we're going to stop there for this part of my episode with Luke and Lauren. We just had such a great conversation that I had to break it into 2 parts. So be sure and tune in 2 weeks if you're listening as these episodes air for part 2 of my conversation with Luke and Lauren Smallcomb. As always, thanks for watching. That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time.